everybody, and welcome to another board game review and gameplay demo. I know it has been far too long since I have done one of these, so I am very excited to do this one. It's a fairly big game, it's a relatively complex game, and thankfully it's one that came out not too long ago. It's very fun. I happen to have the third edition of this one, which is Fury of Dracula. As I said, this is the third edition, the Fantasy Flight edition, and I absolutely love this game. As you may be able to guess from the title, the entire point of this game is that you are trying to hunt down Dracula, right? That is really the entire premise of the game. You have effectively two teams where one team is only a single person who is playing as Dracula, and the rest of the group are all playing as hunters. So the idea is the hunters are all working together to try to hunt down Dracula, and there's rules regarding like table talk, what you can and can't say. If you reveal something, then when you have to reveal it to Dracula because he's got his psychic powers and all this kind of stuff. But the idea is that in the end, it's a very fun game. It's surprisingly well mechanically balanced. There's very little downtime in it, which is absolutely amazing. The artwork is, the artwork is good. I am not a person who's really hung up on aesthetics. You know that if you've seen my videos before. But as I said, this game is fairly complex, but once you get started with it, once you really know what's going on, then it becomes much easier. But with that, we're going to jump right on ahead into what this game is similar to. As for similarities, there are two major games that I wanted to mention. First and foremost is pretty much my favorite co-op game of all time, Pandemic. With the On the Brink expansion, it adds in the possibility of using the bioterrorist. Now what the bioterrorist is it's somebody who's actively working against the rest of the group. That's really all it is. It is exactly the same in Fury of Dracula. You have Dracula who is essentially moving around the board using the exact same rules as the regular players are, just as the bioterrorist does in Pandemic, and essentially Dracula is like leaving behind cards, like leaving behind traps as he goes along, so that you're hopefully able to track him down eventually. And the same thing happens. Once you see the person, once you see either Dracula or the bioterrorist, then you can try to track them down and hopefully you'll be able to catch them eventually. But they're very similar in that sense. And the other major similarity I wanted to mention was Letters from Whitechapel. In that case, you have a very similar investigative sort of feel to the game, but in that case, obviously, the players are looking for Jack the Ripper. That's the whole point. I mean, it takes place in, I was about to say ancient London. It's not ancient London, but either way, point is, it's actually around the same time period as Fury of Dracula, and again, it's that same sort of mentality where you've got everybody versus one person type of thing. And it's a lot of fun. If you've played either of those games, Pandemic a little bit more simple compared to Fear of Dracula as well as Letters from Whitechapel. Letters from Whitechapel is pretty much like on par with Fury of Dracula as far as complexity and what's going on in the game itself. Maybe just slightly more complicated because you've got the different actual murders that you're trying to solve and that kind of stuff. But either way, very similar to the game. With that, I'm going to jump right on ahead into my actual demonstration for how to play Fury of Dracula. Alright everybody, we're basically completely set up and ready to play some Fury of Dracula. You can see that there are a ton of components going on here. This is a pretty big and intense game, but I'm going to go over sort of the broad strokes so that you can at least have a good idea of what to do. But if you're going to play it, make sure that you brush up on the rules so that you can see some of the more detail-oriented aspects to it. For the basic game setup, we've got 4 hunters here at the bottom of the video in this case, and essentially no matter what, you're always going to have all 4 hunters. If you're playing with 2 people, you have one person playing as 4 hunters and the other person is playing as Dracula over here on the left side of the board, right? That's how the game is played. You have to have all 4 hunters because the game is balanced for that, right? Near the hunters, you have these little guys. These are called the train tokens. Those allow you to move along the rail system on the board. You've got the life tokens. Everybody gets their various life tokens. And really, just reading through the different characters' powers and everything, everybody has a special ability that they can do that helps out their fellow hunters and all that kind of stuff. Everybody also gets one of these. This is an action card that just indicates what the different actions are that the hunters can take. And of course, Dracula has his own special character card that he gets over here on his side of the stuff. Right? The other stuff for the hunters is over here in my particular case, where we've got the, these are the event cards that you get when you go through a location, when you do what's called the supply action. Whenever you do a supply action, then you draw an event token or an event card, and then you resolve it. Basically, you either put it in your hand or give it to Dracula, depending on what kind it is. They've got two different backs. We've got the back with this one. This is the hunter's back. And then the bad back, so to speak, is the Dracula one that looks sort of like a flying red skull type of thing right here, right? So if that comes up, then it goes to Dracula. If the other one comes up, that's for the good guys, right? So that's how that works. The other thing that we've got is we've got the pile of items over here. Those are generally used for combat purposes. They have some kind of effect on the combat. They can enhance your weapons. They are new weapons, all sorts of different stuff like that. In addition, there are 3 special type of combat cards that are taken out because they act as the standard combat cards that everybody gets no matter what, right? So we've got escape, punch, and dodge. So whenever you start a combat, the person or people involved in that combat get to take one of each of those and put it in their hand as cards to play. Obviously, I'll get into exactly how the combat works in a little bit, but suffice to say, those 3 piles need to be taken out. There's 4 of each of them, and you can recognize them because they have a very distinct gold or yellow bar on one side of the card. It's on the left side of the card here, right? Whereas the other ones, the regular item cards that you get from the pile, are red instead, okay? So, as far as the way that the game actually functions, there's a couple of things to note. First off, we're working off of a day and night cycle that goes week by week, right? That's what this little timer thing up here is for. It looks like a little sundial. And essentially, we've got this little clock token that moves along. So we go Monday through Sunday, and there are 2 spaces for each, one for the day, one for the night, right? During the daytime, the hunters are allowed to move. They're allowed to get a ticket. They can get a specific ticket here. They can rest, which allows them to recover any damage that they take. They can search, which allows them to reveal and resolve encounter cards, which are these nasty little buggers that are left by Dracula. They can use their special abilities. Each character has a special ability. They can supply, which is to go and get an item card if you're in a major city, one of the larger spaces, and then you also have to get an encounter card as well, right? And then you can also trade if you're in the same location as a fellow hunter. The only exception to that is Van Helsing, who is allowed to trade with anybody anywhere, right? That's his special power, okay? During the nighttime, heroes or the hunters can do any of those actions except for move. They are not allowed to move during the nighttime. Everything else they're allowed to do. There are some changes to how it works though, but again, I'll get into that once I actually start playing. Now, Dracula only gets to do stuff during the nighttime because he's Dracula. He's asleep during the day. He doesn't do anything. The way that Dracula works is somewhat similar to the hunters in that he's able to move around and then he can sort of just lay down traps and ambushes and things of that nature. Throughout the game, Dracula is going to be drawing from this encounter card deck with the little claw hand thing on it. He's always going to have 5 of those available. And essentially, those are sort of the traps that he leaves behind as he's moving through. This trail on the left side of the board, or the right side of the board as you're looking at it this way, this indicates where Dracula is. So starting from the far left, this is where he currently is, and then when he moves, you shift it down, put down the new location and a new encounter card. The location cards is this big giant stack right here, right? You notice that it has a very specific back, that it looks like the, sort of like the evil sun, essentially. Right, so see there's the regular one. The reason that there's a blue and a red version is because the blue ones indicate water locations, right? These are actually alphabetized, and there's one for every location, every city, every sea area within the entire game. So Dracula is able to move around and just do his own thing, and then he drops down these encounter cards in order to try to stop the hunters as he's going through. Now, the way that you win, there's a couple of different ways to win. First, the hunters, in order to win, have to kill Dracula. That's what it boils down to. In order to kill Dracula, they have to do 15 damage to him, cumulative throughout the game. Dracula is able to heal if he manages to get back to Castle Dracula, which is all the way over here. Okay, if he gets back there, he heals 5 damage, but then of course everybody knows exactly where he is because he healed. Okay. The other thing is, as this goes through the week, after a full week is done, we add one of these despair tokens to this little sundial thing to just indicate that everything is sort of going Dracula's way and he is spreading his evilness all throughout. There's a total of 3 pieces that make up essentially the new evil symbol. That's the same one on the back of the location cards, right? So that's how that works, and as I said, Dracula has his own set of combat cards as well, which has this fancy like red leather book back in here. Again, I'm going to get into all of these different things and how they work and all that kind of stuff. Dracula also has some power cards, which are special. They're used in lieu of location cards. I'm not going to discuss them really a whole lot. I can if you guys ask. I'll let you know in the comments what they do. But effectively, this is for an advanced form of the game. I'm just going to do the really basics of just moving around, doing stuff, and how to actually just go from like day to night and what everybody is doing, how to do the combat, all of this kind of stuff. Okay, so again, there is quite a bit to get through, but we are all set up and ready to go. One thing I forgot to mention is that Dracula has this mini map that indicates the entirety of Europe, because the whole point is that he is moving hidden. Nobody knows where he is. The only thing that indicates where he is or where he has been are on these cards, on this track here. So essentially, if he had been in, say, Belgrade, then he would reveal that location card, this dex card, and say, I was in Belgrade. And then he can choose whether or not to reveal the encounter card, that ambush card. They can be anything from a young vampire that the hunters have to fight to like rats or bats or something that forces the hunters to be delayed, or they have to move somewhere else, and all this kind of stuff, right? But Dracula has to reveal that he was there and he made it into like a little a hideout, essentially is what it's called, right? One thing about the encounter cards, this is a major way for Dracula to gain influence. There is a thing called the maturation. Essentially, when one of these cards falls off the board, it is matured, right? So for example, there are young vampires, or well, they're vampires, and this example particularly is a reckless vampire. At the very bottom, you can see there's some text that says matured effect. Reveal the location card and advance the influence track by 4, and then clear this hideout and the hideouts on the 4th, 5th, and 6th spaces of the trail, which are these last 3 here. So essentially, you lose out on those encounter cards, but you get 4 influence for it. If Dracula gets a total of 13 influence, he wins the game, right? Also, if all the hunters are dead, he wins as well. There's a lot of ways for Dracula to win. He's a crazy dude. Okay, so with that, as I mentioned, we are pretty much all set up. Really, the only thing left now is Dracula needs to select his initial starting location. Essentially, the rules for that is it can't be on water, because water actually injures Dracula. It's essentially a way for him to bug out, because otherwise he could just sort of hang out on the water the entire time. And that's really the only rule. He can't be there. He also can't be in Castle Dracula, nor can he be on any of the 4 locations where the good guys start. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually pick a location that's relatively close to the hunters, simply because that will allow me to give you guys a better idea of how the game plays and show you more of the mechanics. All right, so we are going to start him off over here in Leipzig. All right, so what I need to do is I just need to dig through here and find the Leipzig card. Right, so you can see it says Leipzig on the top, and it highlights the exact location of Leipzig on the board, or at least its location relative to everything else. So this card goes face down on the board just like that. All right, so now I have a location. I don't put an encounter card there because this is the first one of the game, but as Dracula you do start with 5 encounter cards, so every time you move you do get another, you do get to place a new location card because you're moving around, and you add an encounter card to that new location. All right, and I believe that's pretty much everything. The other major thing, I mentioned these train tokens here. Train tokens allow the hunters to move around a lot more efficiently, a lot more quickly. You can see here on the board we've got the yellow and the white train or rails, effectively. So here, let me zoom in just a little bit so you can see better. All right, there we go. So down over, let's see, down over here with in Italy, then you can see we've got the yellow train tokens going here. The red ones are the roads. You can go over the roads no matter what. You don't need anything special to do that, but in order to go on the rails, these yellow ones and then also the white ones, which are primarily over up here in the northwestern portion of the board, you can use the train ticket to go over them, and you can see some of them are split. You've got, oh, oops, camera doesn't focus. In this case, we've got a 3/2, so it can go 3 spaces by white rails or 2 spaces by yellow rails, right? Or you can only go, or you can just go 2 spaces white or 1 or whatever you want to do. All right, so with that, we're gonna go right on ahead and get started with actually playing through a couple of rounds of this game. There are a couple of things that are important to note for the hunters before we really get started. First off, they do have a specific order of play where they start off with Lord Golding and then go to Dr. John Stewart and then Van Helsing and finally Mina Harkis. Now the way that you tell that is by the number in the upper left corner of their specific cards, right? Everybody is starting in a large city, which means that when they do the supply action, they'll be able to get items. Items are tremendously helpful in this game because they can really assist you in combat. The problem is twofold. First, you can supply both during the day and the night. And if you do it during the day, you get to take an event card from the top of the deck. Taking it from the top of the deck is nice because, you know, if you get a Dracula card, you can get rid of it. You can discard the card. If you are doing it at night, you have to take the card from the bottom of the deck. And if you get a Dracula card, then it goes to Dracula and he gets to use it later on. It's very, very unfortunate. In addition, on the cards here for each individual character, we've got the limits for both the number of items as well as the number of event cards that each person is able to do, or each person is able to hold, right? So just to go over very briefly the special abilities for the heroes, Mina Harker, first off, she's bitten by Dracula, which is a very nasty way for the heroes to die. And essentially, because of that, she has the psychic bond with him where she can actually search the region, which are the colored outline regions here, to tell if he's there. The Dracula doesn't have to say exactly what location he's in, he just has to say whether or not he's in that region specifically, right? Dr. John Stewart, he is a doctor, so if you heal in the same city as the doctor, then you get to heal twice instead of just one when you take the rest action. In addition, you can have up to 4 item cards and 4 event cards instead of only having 3, which is the typical one. Lord Goldaming, sorry I mispronounced his name earlier, when you supply from the large city, you get 2 item cards instead of only getting 1 item card, and when you take a ticket, you get 2 of them instead of just 1. Now you can only have a total of 2 tickets ever, but essentially it allows you to much more efficiently swap out whatever it is that you don't want to have. Lastly, Van Helsing, his thing is, again, he's allowed to trade with anybody in any city no matter where they are, and he's also allowed to be bitten 3 times before he dies instead of only twice. Normally if you get bitten twice, then you're dead, and it's very, very unfortunate. That's a specific thing that happens in combat though that I'll be able to show you. Okay, as far as general strategy is concerned for the hunters, they always should be trying to track down and kill Dracula. I mean, obviously that's the point of the game. Standing still is not a very good idea in this game. The problem is it's also good because of the supply action, because you're allowed to pick the event from the top and you know whether or not it's good. But since you can only move during the day, it might be better to take the risk and do the supply action at night. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you essentially how the game works, and we're going to be moving around, we're going to be doing all the stuff, I'll be explaining as I go, and for sure we'll be able to get into some combat. Since I'm controlling everybody, I'll make certain that, that some combat actually happens. So essentially we're starting on Monday morning, okay, or Monday during the day action. So again, this is when the characters are able to move, and we are allowed to move along the roads. We don't have any rail tickets yet, so we're not allowed to do that. But as far as the supply actions are concerned, I keep mentioning the large cities here. Now, if we take a look down at the base of Italy here, we've got Bari and Naples, right? Naples has a much larger icon compared to Bari, and that's because Bari is a small city versus Naples is a large city. If you go to Naples, when you do a supply action, you'll be able to get an item, whereas if you do it in Bari, you'll only be able to get the event card. You won't get the item along with it. And in addition, you can see that they both have an anchor on them. That's because you're allowed to go into the water after that point. Okay, and again, water damages Dracula. He doesn't want to be around there, so it's a good place to try to funnel him and chase him around, right? So, moving right along to the number one, which is our good Lord person, and I believe that this is him. Honestly, I have some trouble telling the characters apart sometimes, but I'm pretty sure that's him. And then this is, see, this is what I'm talking about. Like the woman is easy, obviously. Incidentally, Dracula just hangs out on his little stump spot right over there. All right, so the doctor is the one who's brandishing the cross. That's this guy right here. Yeah, so the Lord, I was right. He's the one with the rifle. Van Helsing is the dude with the stake. Okay, cool, got it. Not that it really matters in this case, but for the sake of argument. All right, so since this is the only time that we can move, he's going to go ahead and move up to Milan. And then, let's see, next is the good doctor. So the doctor is going to move right over here to Berchkast. So the nice thing about this initial setup, again, you don't get to pick where the hunters start, but essentially we can immediately sort of pincer in towards wherever Dracula might be, or theoretically we can, because we got somebody starting all the way over here on the far east side, and then the other three starting on the west. Now again, Dracula can literally start anywhere except Castle Dracula, any of the C spots, or where the heroes are. So he could start up here in England, he could start all the way down here in Spain, you could start literally anywhere that he wants. Now I just picked Leipzig simply because of ease of the demo, alright, but you can go anywhere. Next up, number 3 is Van Helsing. So both he and Mita will go to Cologne. And that's it. So that's the end of the day phase. All right, now it's the night phase. Again, the hunters all get to go during the night, and in this case, they're all going to supply. They're all in major cities, so that means that they all get to take an item card, and then they take an event card. The problem is, because it's nighttime, that means that they have to take the event card from the bottom of this deck. Now, when you take it from the bottom of the deck, you don't know what the icon is. If you do it during the day, then you can discard those Dracula icons. But when you're doing it from the bottom, if you get a Dracula icon, it has to go immediately to Dracula. Okay, so first off is the good Lord over here. Now, whenever he gets, because of his wealth power, then he gets to draw 2 item cards instead of just 1. So he's got 1, so he's got garlic and a pistol. Very exciting, very exciting. Now, ordinarily these are hidden, obviously, for the purpose of the demo. I'm not going to hide them, okay? And then he takes an event card from the bottom of the deck, and thankfully it's a hunter card. And in this case, Mystic Research. Only Van Helsing can play this card. This is a problem, because obviously Lord Golding is not, or however you pronounce his name, I apologize. He is not Van Helsing, so he has to get this card to Van Helsing. This is part of why it's so important for all of the hunters to be in play. There are several event cards like this that require a specific person in order to use them. But essentially, this is the type of thing we're talking about. So in that case, it allows you to look at the bottom 6 cards and then just sort of rearrange and or discard them. So it's a really, really good power. It's a really good ability. All right. Next up is the good doctor. So getting an item, he got a rifle, which is pretty sweet. And then, whoops, his event card from the bottom of the deck. Woohoo! He got lucky as well. Play when you are ambushed by a non-vampire encounter card. So the encounter cards are these cards down here that Dracula puts down, and essentially that allows him to dodge out of the way of one. Alright? Next up is Van Helsing. So he'll take an item. In this case, he got a rifle as well. And encounter card from the bottom. Woohoo! Lucky, lucky. Hired Scouts. So this says play immediately. And then you choose 2 cities. Dracula must reveal those cities' location cards. Now, unfortunately, this means 2 things. This means that, first off, it's the very early part of the game, so it's not very likely that you'll be able to find him. And secondly, if you do find him, Dracula is screwed, because then everybody knows exactly where he is and can immediately jump all up on him. And it's very, very unpleasant. Right? So, what we're going to do is, well, they're just going to pick randomly, and they'll say, we'll say Naples and Madrid. Nope, Dracula's not there. Okay, we all know where Dracula is. He's in Leipzig, right? Shh, don't tell anybody. Okay, so Van Helsing still gets his rifle, though. The Lord has his too. And finally, last but not least, we've got the Heavenly Host power. So the Heavenly Host power is pretty interesting. Again, all of these cards can be just read if you ever play this game. They're fairly simple. Oh no, we got a Dracula one! Now, because we reveal the Dracula card from the bottom of the deck, that means that we don't even get to look at it. We don't know what it is. It just goes straight to Dracula. So he's going to read it. Now I'm Dracula because I'm at this end of the table. Let's see. Ooh. Interesting. So this says, each combat resolved during the next dawn or day is resolved as if it was at night. There are specific cards in Dracula's combat powers that do different things depending on if it's day or night. Alright? So, simply to speed things along, now it is Dracula's turn. Dracula always goes after the hunter's turn. Okay, so for this, what's going to happen is Dracula is going to move. So this is the Leipzig card, remember, but again, nobody actually knows that it's there. And then we are going to go to Frankfurt. Okay, so the first thing we got to do is we got to dig out the Frankfurt card. Alright, so we got the Frankfurt card. We take a look at the 5 encounter cards that we have available. We've got Vampire, Saboteur, which delays hunters, another Vampire, and okay, so just a few other vampires. So, let me see here. We will go with the Reckless Vampire, right? Essentially what this is going to allow is for Dracula to basically have backup during a combat. Okay, so he's done. We get a new encounter card. And that's it. That's the entirety of Dracula's turn. He just does his little thing. Okay, and now we are back to morning, and it is now Tuesday instead. So everybody gets to move. Alright, now again, we start off with Lord, what's his name over there? He's going to go up to Munich. And then the good doctor is going to go over here to Belgrade. And then it is time for Van Helsing. Van Helsing is going to go to Frankfurt. And then she wants to go to Strasbourg. But since he has moved into Frankfurt, Dracula then reveals himself because he is in Frankfurt. There is a Reckless Vampire there. We take the Dracula token, put him on Frankfurt. And now, because it's still Mina Harker's turn, she will move into Frankfurt as well. So we will have combat at dusk, okay, essentially. And also we played this card, I forgot to do it, Nocturnal Visit, to play at the end of the Dracula phase, which was at the end of the night phase last time. Each combat resolved during the next dawn or day is resolved as if it was at night. So in other words, now that we get to fight, that means that everything is going to happen as though it was at nighttime, okay? So, that's the end of the day phase. We're done with that. Now what happens is we go into dusk, which is moving into the night phase. So the combat happens at dusk. It doesn't happen during the night. It doesn't happen at the beginning of the night or at the end of the day. It is actually at dusk. So what happens now is the 2 people who are in combat with Dracula will get their escape, punch, and dodge cards, and then Dracula will get 5 of his combat cards right here. The way that the combat works is fairly simple. On each card, it says very clearly what the card itself does. For example, the punch card. The vampire suffers 1 damage. Easy enough, right? And on the side of the cards, in this case, there are 2 symbols. Let me see if we can focus it. Focus. No, you don't want to focus? Fine. We'll just put it down here then. Right? On the side of the card, there are 2 symbols. One of them is a symbol that looks kind of like a weird eye, and the other one is a symbol that looks like somebody fanning out some cards, because they correspond to several of Dracula's cards, right? So you see here, the plot card is the one that looks like it's got a bunch of cards on it, okay? And essentially what these mean is that these will cancel out the card that Dracula plays if it matches that symbol, right? Another example here is, here we go, there is the mesmerize. Right, the mesmerize card is the one that sort of hypnotizes the people and makes them all freak out and go like kind of crazy and stuff. Okay, and that's effectively how it works. That's pretty much the end all be all of it. Right, easy enough, yeah. So like I said, the combat's very, very simple. All it is everybody plays down a specific card, and then Dracula, if he is in a combat with more than 1 hunter, he has to declare which person he is attacking, okay? So the 2 players that are in it right now, or the 2 hunters that are in it right now, they add whatever item cards they have to their hand of combat cards. So Van Helsing gets to use his rifle, just like this. All right, so then everybody chooses a combat card. That, then I'll go with that. All right, and then Dracula will pick a card, and after everybody has chosen a card, that is when Dracula declares who it is he's going to be attacking. All right, just like that. So now Dracula will say, I am attacking Van Helsing. So everybody flips over the cards. Washow, washow, and washow. All right, so Dracula played strength. The engaged hunter suffers 2 damage, and then other stuff happens. Mina played punch, and the thing is that Dracula isn't engaged with her, so it always hits him. He is not trying to actively avoid it. And then Van Helsing played the rifle attack. Now, nothing gets canceled out, because the rifle cancels claws in the bat, punch cancels out mesmerize and plot, but strength is the giant fist of awesomeness, right? So if the hunter played punch, crucifix, or a weapon card, cancel that card. If it is night and he played crucifix or a weapon card, discard that card. Because it is nighttime, because of the card that we discarded, the rifle goes away permanently. The rifle was essentially broken, okay? Because that's what Dracula does, okay? So that's it. Now, Dracula gets a new combat card from the deck. The punch card, any card that the hunters play, stays out for a single round, because that way whoever's playing Dracula knows what they do not have as an option, essentially is what it boils down to, so that they know that it's not possible. Let's see here. Let's do this one. And it is possible for Dracula to choose a different person. It's fine. That's not a problem. Because Dracula got punched, he takes 1 damage, and then Van Helsing took 2 damage from getting hit with the strength attack. Okay. Let's see here. Do that. Now, what do you want to do? Go ahead and do this. And same thing, we're going to be attacking Van Helsing as Dracula, in this case with mesmerize. And now Mina played dodge, which doesn't do anything because she's not being attacked. And then Van Helsing played dodge as well. But the thing is, dodge is effective against fangs, strength attacks, and oh shoot, I apologize. I forgot to zoom out the camera. Actually, here we can do this instead. So we've got the 2 dodges and then the mesmerize. You can't see it very well. There we go. 2 dodges and mesmerize. Hey, I do apologize for not zooming the camera back out. Get it back a little bit. Okay, so the Mesmerize was against Van Helsing. Now the thing is, it's the eye symbol, which is not canceled out by dodge. So Van Helsing is now Mesmerized, which means the Hunter's card is canceled, and if that Hunter is memorized, so you suffer 1 fewer damage from the weapon cards, and then keep it face up until the end of combat, right? So Mina gets her punch back, and Van Helsing's dodge stays face up because he's still in the fight. Right, now we go again. Essentially, combat ends when one of several things happen. It's either when all of the hunters escape using the escape card, when Dracula retreats using either turn to bats or mist form, or bat form or mist form, or if Dracula plays a total of 6 cards. That's essentially those are the 3 things that will end a combat, right? So let's see here. Go ahead and do this. So we'll put that face down. And then Van Helsing over here. Sorry, can't really see it very well. I do apologize again for that. Right? And then we'll play this. Right? Because there's 2 hunters, they're kind of, you know, they're like, whoa, we got this, we got it. They think they're super cool. Alright, so Dracula's going to play this card now. Okay. So Dracula has played Fangs against Van Helsing again. And Van Helsing played Punch, as did Mina. So Dracula takes 2 damage because he got punched twice. But his Fangs are not canceled. Nobody played something that was canceled it. So you recover 2 damage and the engaged hunter suffers 2 damage. Alright, so just take those 2 away. And then Van Helsing got hit. If it is night and the engaged hunter is mesmerized, which he is, he does not suffer 2 damage, but instead he is bitten and removed from this combat, then advance the influence track by 1. Right? Ah! So we'll take that back. Wow. So then Van Helsing gets a bite token. Now, because of Van Helsing's special ability, he can take up to 2 more bites before he's dead, but he is out of the combat. He cannot participate anymore. Alright? So, the Mesmerize technique goes away too. Alright, so that was the 3rd one. And now she gets dodge back. These are all going away because Van Helsing is no longer in the combat. And now, Mina is going to play this one. Dracula gets another card, and let's see here. We'll play this one. Alright, so Dracula plays Claws, and Mina plays Escape. So, Mina gets to escape and runs away, but it does not cancel out the claws. So she takes a total, she takes 2 damage because she's the engaged hunter, and then if it's night, which it is, choose any hunter to suffer 2 damage, which is, a total of 4. So basically everybody got hit hard, but now all of the hunters are out of the combat. Van Helsing got removed because he got bit, and then because it was the actual mesmerized bite. And then we also got 1 up on the influence track. And that's the end of the combat. That's how it goes. Now, the Reckless Vampire is still there, but we're not going to be using it. Basically, we can say that Dracula always has the choice of whether or not to utilize the ambush. So in this case, we will say that he didn't, the vampire didn't attack. But essentially, that's the end of the combat. And now, everybody can say, okay, we know that's where Dracula is, there's only so many places he can go, so we can track him down. And that's probably what's going to end up happening here. But that'll be it for exactly what I'm playing here. Obviously, I didn't show the entirety of the game. There are a lot of little things I didn't show. But again, there's things like when Dracula moves over water, he takes the damage. Doing the actual ambush means that the card is just resolved, whatever it happens to be. There are various tokens that indicate if there's a storm blocking your way or if the railways are down and things of that nature. But those are sort of the broad strokes for how to play Fury of Dracula. I hope that you enjoyed this demo. Again, I know that it was a longer one, but it is a much bigger game. But it's very, very exciting. That's the main stuff that you'll need, is just how to progress through the game and then how to actually do the combat. And that's how you do the combat, not only that, but with multiple hunters as well. So with that, I hope that you enjoyed it, but for now we're going to go right on into my personal pros and cons for this game. Well, everybody, I hope that you enjoyed my demo for Fury of Dracula. As I mentioned while I was playing it, I know that I couldn't go over all of the rules, all of the nuance aspects for it, but I do hope that gave you at least enough of the idea of the broad strokes for it so that you're at least somewhat interested in trying it out for yourself. It really is a tremendously fun game. But with that, I'm going to go right on ahead into my pros and cons, as well as just some general conclusions about the game itself. So the first pro for this is that I love the fact that it's a co-op game with a really big twist. Normally when you've got team-based co-op games, you're talking about two teams that are trying to accomplish the same goal simultaneously, and whoever does it first wins. Whereas with this, you're talking about two very distinctive play styles within the game itself. Now, again, I mean, it's all versus one, so Dracula is a team of a single person, but at the same time, it means that you've got a lot of variety in the gameplay itself. So that means that you've got more replayability for everybody. One time you might play as a hunter, the next time you play as Dracula, and it's vastly different styles. The hunters, the whole point is you're talking about cooperation and tactics and strategy and all that kind of stuff. Whereas with Dracula, obviously you're trying to strategize and figure out what to put where, when to ambush, all that kind of thing. But it's a much more subtle game. And because of that, it's very, very impressive, frankly, and it's a lot more interesting in my personal opinion, right? Pro number 2 for this game is it is a complex game, but it's presented in such a way that it's very easy to understand. If you read through the rules, there are actually 2 rule books. There's one that's Learn to Play, which is essentially, this is how you set the game up, this is how you go through the actions, this is what everything means, blah, 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 blah. And then you have the other one, which is the Rules of Play, which is effectively just a glossary of all of the different terms. I love the way that it's organized, and again, it's presented in a simplistic enough manner that you can understand even some of the more subtle and complex aspects to this game itself. The rulebooks in a way reminded me of things like Dungeon Lords and Space Alert and like Galaxy Trucker with, is it Vlada? I don't know how to pronounce his name. I do apologize, I probably butchered it. But his rulebooks are very famously really humorous. They're genuinely a pleasure to read. And in part it's because he realizes that the games are so complex that you have to be humorous, you have to have some kind of an entertainment value as you're reading the rules. We have very good rule books, we have very bad rule books. This is an example of some very, very well done, well written rules. Right? Those are my 2 major pros for this game. I mean, other than that, you can just see in the demo that it's just a very fun, very unique style. I love the combat aspects. I love how that part of the game itself works. I love that you're talking about with the simplicity aspect, that you're thinking more about the overall game, you're thinking more strategically as opposed to simply like, wait, am I allowed to do that? Am I capable of doing that? Do I need something to do that? Which can be a problem in a lot of other games. With that, some of the cons, the biggest con that I have is really with Dracula himself. Because the problem is Dracula, the character, needs somebody who's very experienced with the game to actually play him. Because one of the problems that you can run into is if Dracula screws up, you don't realize it until much later on, if ever. And that can be a huge issue. That can throw off the entire game. So you need to make certain that you've got a Dracula who really knows how to play the game, knows all the rules, all that kind of stuff. Because you're talking about a significant amount of downtime as well. Dracula being familiar with the rules is also helpful because then, you know, as the hunters are going through the day cycle, then Dracula can be looking up the rules and all this kind of stuff. It just makes the game run a lot more smoothly. Which leads right into my second major con, which you probably saw as I was playing through the game. One reason I had to keep it at least relatively short as I did is because when you're playing through this game, the turns can really drag out if you're having players play as multiple characters. So if you're playing with only 2 people, that means you've got one person controlling all 4 people plus, and then just the one person controlling Dracula. If you have the total 5 players, then you can have somebody saying like, I'm moving here, and then I'm moving here, I'm moving here, I'm doing this, doing that. And then you can say to somebody, like, oh, I'm doing a search. They take their 2 cards. The next person, I'm doing a search as well. Whatever it happens, or a supply action rather, not a search, because the search is the encounter card. But I mean, it makes it run much more smoothly if you've got the same number of players as you have characters. That said, it is very possible to do it. If you're playing with 2 players, have the more experienced person play as the 4 hunters, because they'll be able to keep the pace going a little bit faster. Again, it's extremely difficult for Dracula to keep pace because it really doesn't do much. He only acts at night, so it can really make everything drag on a little bit. But that said, the game itself is a relatively reasonable length. Another very minor con is just randomness. Just as with any game, we've got randomness that can potentially mess up the entire thing. A really good example is when I was playing this game one time, I don't remember exactly when, it doesn't matter. I got that same card, the Scouts card that says you can look at 2 different places. It was the exact same scenario. First turn, got the Scouts card, and boom, found Dracula in that case. And we were all just sort of like, wah! Ah! And we're all freaking out because we know exactly where he is, and Dracula's sitting there just like, oh god, I can't believe it. And because like it is ridiculous, and then we all just immediately start into like combat, charge, go, go, move, move, move. And it ended up still taking a while because we didn't have the items for it. So we were trying to keep pressure on him while simultaneously just trying to maintain ourselves as well. But with that, as far as I mean, just generally, the randomness, you can't combat it. I mean, you see it in every single game, literally. That is a big part of every game. But in general, overall conclusions, I really, really love this game. I love that you've got the subtle shift from the more long-term strategizing of getting the train tickets, getting the train tickets, getting new items, all of that kind of stuff, and then that sudden shift when somebody finds Dracula or one of his hideouts or something, then you're immediately sitting there like calculating out where could he have gone, how long has it been, all that kind of stuff. And then you start to use your train tokens, you're starting to move around the board a lot more efficiently and just trying to converge on where you believe he might be. And then like everybody is starting to freak out. Dracula's freaking out because you're on his tail, all the hunters are freaking out because you're trying not to lose him. It's an incredible feeling. It's absolutely amazing. I really love it. Again, I love the fact that this is a co-op board game that has very distinct sides to it. I think the theme for this game is absolutely perfect. It is a great way to utilize this hidden movement style of game. The combat is really fun. The game itself is surprisingly streamlined for something so complex. I highly, highly recommend it if you haven't tried it out already. If you haven't had any interest in it, I hope that this video has made you at least somewhat interested to give it a shot if you're able to find somebody who owns it. But with that, thank you so very much for watching this. I want to apologize again for the issues with the camera. This is my new fancy camera. This is the first review that I'm doing with it. I hope that it was at least good enough for you guys to understand. Do let me know what other games you would like to see me do. I've got my big giant list that I really want to do. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to record videos like this that are so extensive, but they are very fun to do. I'm hoping to do more in the future. I do very much hope that you like this particular video. Let me know what you think about the genre itself, the game itself, all of those things in the comments below. And with that, I will see you next time. Thank you all again for watching my review and gameplay demo for the 3rd edition of Fury of Dracula. Like I said, I know it's been quite a while since I've done one of these, but they are so much fun and I really do enjoy it when I get a chance. Again, this is the first one I'm doing with my fancy new camera, so I apologize for some of the technical difficulties with it, but I do hope that you really enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something about this game, and most importantly, I hope it made you interested in trying out the game yourself. With that, I've got several of my playlists linked up at the top of the page so you can see some more of my work, and you can click the big giant subscribe button to see even more of me in the future. With that, thank you so very much again. Let me hear all of your feedback in the comments below, including any suggestions for other reviews, and I will see you next time.